More than 176 people want to join the senatorial race. There are 12 seats up for grabs. Among the aspirants is an advisor to the Health Department and the president of the iBank Foundation. Let's now get to know Dr. Mingita Padilla. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Ruth, and good evening to everyone who's watching tonight.
Maybe the first question I would like to ask you, Dr. Padilla, why do you want to move from the medical field to politics?
Actually, Ruth, it was a leap of faith, but what I had to do and hope that somebody would catch me because the call was coming little by little, getting louder and louder. But the last straw was the pandemic and the response of the government, which we really felt was there was no sense of urgency. And there were so many things which could have been done better. Then the final straw was all the corruption that we saw. The Farmally, the PSDBM, the 42 billion transferred to the DOH, whereas so many of our colleagues were crying for PPEs, using garbage bags for PPEs. So many were dying, and there was seemed to be so much unadulterated, obscene profiteering amidst all the suffering. So when you're faced with that, and then my colleagues were begging me, we need a doctor in the Senate, somebody who knows what it's like to practice, somebody who's also served the country in my own way as in the private sector, who has worked with government as an advocate and sometimes frustrated advocate at that. I think everything, snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And afterwards, I kept asking for signs from God and I got it. And the call was so strong. And despite the fear and the sadness in a way, because I had to leave my patients, I cannot continue as it was. The call is stronger than the fear. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because if I don't do it, I'll regret it the rest of my life. So we have to try.
Dr. Padilla, you already mentioned yung ibang nakita nyo na sort of how the government allegedly mismanaged the COVID-19 crisis. But how would you have handled it? Like balancing lives and livelihood, like the implementation of the lockdowns, and also yung benefits for medical frontliners.
Well, I think I've always maintained in all my interviews that there was a lack of sense of urgency, that instead of locking down right away or closing borders right away, they were still thinking of hurting the feelings of China. Vaccines could have been more made available earlier, because we heard complaints even from some diplomats that the Philippines didn't seem serious because there were so many innuendos but no serious deals, no serious. They kept flirting but were not serious, something like that. I mean, it was like there was no sense of urgency, and it seemed that they were thinking about deals more than public welfare. And I know for a fact there was a tug of war all the time between those wanting to do their job earnestly and those thinking of profits. And this tug of war delayed so many things. Now, the granular lockdowns would have been better than the draconian lockdowns, except that we didn't have the capacity because our infrastructure, our health infrastructure, would not have been able to take it. So the initial draconian lockdown was, I think, necessary. But after that, we should have gone into granular lockdown if we had just tested more often, mass testing, better contact tracing. So much could have been done better. But this is all hindsight, okay? And now we have our vaccines, although we should ramp it up. And definitely the healthcare providers, the health workers, they are taken for granted. They have been taken for granted so long, and they're asking for so little: food allowance, transportation allowance, hazard pay. And then, I was in a rally this morning at the Senate, and I could really feel their pain when they were talking about, you don't want to give us, you only gave 20% of us those benefits, and we see all this money allegedly or apparently going into the pockets of so many people, and yet you cannot give us what's due us. And you're now angry at us when some of us go abroad for greener pasture, and you say we have no malasakit, we have no compassion for our country. But what did you do to us? It was a nurse was in tears saying these things, and this is how we feel. We doctors are hurt. We are hurt, and that's why this was also the source of the statement of indignation, which over 600 of us have already signed, which is very rare. Indignation and call to action. We cannot go on this way, not just for us, but for the future. This sort of corruption, which I think is we consider heinous, because it really cost deaths. It robbed us of life. It robbed us of a chance to recover faster from this pandemic. It cannot go on, and we cannot condone it, and we cannot turn our backs to it. It
So,
must change.
so Dr. Padilla, how do you plan to combat what you're calling heinous corruption?
Well, as a senator or now?
Yeah, well, as a senator
Well,
also.
yeah, well, now we want accountability. We want the Senate to come up with a correct report. We want people to be charged. We want everything to be coming to the conclusion. We will not allow cover-ups, and we will call attention to it if we feel our intelligence is being insulted by the cover-ups. Because sometimes it's so blatant that even you don't have to be a genius or educated to see that there's a cover-up. Even the most ordinary person in the street will say, ano ba naman yan? Napaka-obvious naman yan. Masyado naman tayong niloloko, no? Ginagawang tanga. They even say that, no? So we will have to be vigilant, and we will call out. We doctors who are usually so quiet, we're just so involved with our patients, we will call out what we see. And if it's not correct, then we will do something about it. And I think some of us will actually also file charges in court. So we're not going to wait for the Senate to do so, but I hope they do so. But some private citizens will also file charges in court.
In your previous interviews, and you're also the co-convener of Doctors for Truth and Public Welfare, you have given a lot of importance on the fight against misinformation, especially in terms of sa healthcare, no? Just how important is that, and what do you plan to do about it?
Well, if given the chance to be a senator, one of my priorities will be also to see how we can combat medical misinformation. Never mind the misinformation is just, nakakatawa, like this guy was kidnapped by a marshal or something like that. But if it's medical information, especially the kind that scares people, that prevents people, from getting vaccinated, which we know unequivocally saves lives. Vaccines save lives. All the statistics in the world have shown that. For every 10% increase in your vaccination, your hospitalization goes down by 40+% for every 10%. So can you imagine if you're stopping that because of medical misinformation? We ought to have a law. And we also need to educate our students. Maybe this is in connection with that, digital knowledge. How do you tell fake news from truth? And how do you also prevent predators from attacking or endangering our youth? This is all related, okay? May I say something also about moving on, how we can recover from COVID, from these lockdowns, how our economy can recover? Ruth?
Yes, go
May I
ahead.
say something about that? Because, I think almost all scientists around the world have now agreed that we're going away from the zero COVID to living with COVID. Because if we want zero COVID before we become normal or have some normalcy, we will not recover. We are one of the worst performing countries in the world. And according to Secretary Carl Chua himself, it will take us about 10 years to really recover. But we can hasten this, okay? One is we have to learn how to live with COVID. And the only way to do that is to ramp up vaccinations and to test frequently. We cannot just limit ourselves to PCR. And I'm glad to see that in many areas, in many offices, in many government agencies, they're using the antigen test because this is the one that's very practical. So we can go about our daily lives more freely. But
Okay.
as far as vaccinations are concerned, we have to now look outside NCR because this is the problem. We have to vaccinate before the surges come. Let's
Okay.
not wait for the surges. Because many of these places, once they have a surge, you'll have more deaths because they don't have the health infrastructure to deal with the surges.
Okay,
there's
Dr. Padilla, yeah. Also, outside of the medical field, no, we also want to hear about your economic agenda, maybe in terms of fighting poverty alleviation or, ensuring more job security, maybe.
Yeah, well, of course, you know that the health will always be related to jobs, okay? Because if you have, like what we saw, the pandemic, the whole world stopped. We lost jobs, etc. But I'd like also to focus on, can I also focus on the neglected parts, or neglected sectors of society, which are the farmers and the fisher folk? Because they are in dire straits, and our country is in danger of losing our farmers if we do not pay attention to them. I have been holding dialogues with them, and although they were laws supposedly to empower them and to make their situation better, they have not been implemented. So I will try to look into the benefits for the fisher folk and the farmers. Okay, and this is imagine we're an agricultural country. We cannot possibly be dependent on imports because one day the weapons of war will be food.
Mhm.
And if we don't have our own food production, we will be very vulnerable to other countries. Imagine that, because we never took the time to develop our agriculture and we neglected our farmers. So food security is one way, and of helping our economy, helping the least of our people. Now, as far as the jobs now, I think we have to continue where we're going now, which is opening up the economy slowly, making sure that we have some semblance of normalcy, while also ensuring that we have agile or flexible mechanisms to keep the cases at a manageable level. We should stop thinking of cases now per se. We should already base our decisions and base our opinion of whether we're doing okay or not on hospitalizations, because COVID, once we have been vaccinated, and then we have to ramp up the production of tablets
Okay.
like molnupiravir, which we like to be an antibiotic, then our lives can go back to normal. And as soon as
Okay.
we have that confidence, our economy will grow and we'll have jobs again.
Okay, we will continue this up-close conversation with Dr. Mingita Padilla after a quick break. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines.
Regent Mochi, your locally produced glutinous rice cake, comes in mango, green tea, ube, and assorted flavored packs. Regent Mochi Japanese-style glutinous rice cake by Regent.
Gumagaan ang inuman pag Sunday light.
Hoy, musta?
Ako, stress sa work, kaya ini-imagine ko nasa beach ako. Ako, busy sa paglaba at pagluto, kaya ini-imagine ko nag-eat all of it tayo.
Ako ini-imagine ko yung importante. Laging masaya. Kasi miss ko na kayo.
Buti na lang, may Sunday light dito sa tindahan.
Pagtapos ng mabigat na araw, mag-inuman with friends and Sunday Light. 100 calories lang. Magaan sa tiyan.
Waitin natin to. Ang alin? Mag-imagine?
Hindi.
Mag-inuman.
This is the final word on CNN Philippines. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ruth Cabal. We continue our up-close conversation with senatorial aspirant Dr. Mingita Padilla. Doctor, I just want to know what you plan to do with the war on drugs. How do you plan to handle that?
Okay. But before I go on the war on drugs, can I just say a few more words about poverty? Just a few more words.
Go ahead.
Because I forgot to mention that come next year, the new budget, the Mandanas ruling of the Supreme Court will come into effect, meaning LGUs will be getting more funds, not 27.6% more than they are today. And we need to make sure that these funds are able to improve the economy in the LGUs, especially in the very poor communities. Okay, so that needs a very close monitoring by the DILG and the various other line agencies. Make sure that they have deliverables. It should be results oriented. So you have the money, but we must see results, and that needs oversight. And as a senator, we will make sure we have oversight, whether it's health, it's agriculture, and other devolved functions of government. So it's full devolution. Okay. Now with the war on drugs, I used to be the president of the Drug Abuse Research Foundation, or DARE. Okay. So we had a very, very successful drug rehabilitation program. But you must remember, the drug addicts need a lifetime of healing. You cannot just say, okay, tapos ka na sa rehab mo, you're okay. No, you need a lifetime of healing. And the best support comes from the community. So it has to be a community-based response. We must go after the big fish. We must go after the pushers. We must go after the drug lords. But please, do not go after the the users, no, per se, or the small time, that you have to heal them. You have to heal them. I know that there's a lot of criminality behind drugs. I know that. But I also know that so many of these addicts can have a better life if they have the right guidance. So we had a very nice system in there. And a lot of the church groups and the community groups can do that also. So let's think of it as a disease, okay? But a lifelong disease. In other words, it's just like being an alcoholic. You have Alcoholics Anonymous. Recovering drug addicts need a lifetime to heal, and they need the support of the community. They should not be discriminated upon. They should be supported. This we can do, actually, through programs in the community. And we can make that one of our projects as well.
Dr. Padilla, for the last part of our interview, we have questions, a series of questions that you should just answer with yes or no. No explanation needed, okay? First question, do you favor easier public access to the SALN of the President, Vice President, and members of Congress?
Definitely yes.
Do you support
Yes.
lifting foreign ownership limits in the Constitution? Yes or no?
Some of it, yes.
Yes.
Some.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you favor the reimposition of death penalty for drug-related crimes?
Now, I would have to say no.
Should a sitting president be allowed to run for vice president in the next election?
No.
Do you favor resuming peace talks with communist rebels?
Yes, to a certain extent.
Should the country be more aggressive in protecting its maritime interests in the West Philippine Sea?
Definitely yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining the Final Word senatorial aspirant Dr. Mingita Padilla.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay. SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.